Well, two of the top 10 teams in last week's Uncle Lou top 10 poll went down on Saturday. So obviously there's going to be some shakeup in this week's poll. Who moves up? Who moves down? Let's find out right now. Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also. And two, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and a lot of times they're even watchable. I would appreciate it. Thumbs up this video, share it with your friends, and let's get right into today's top 10. All right, we're going to do this the same way we've been doing it all year. I'm going to put last week's top 10 up on the screen right now, so you can see where I was at last week with the top 10. Obviously, two of these teams lost, so there's going to be some movement in this poll. Probably going to be some new teams coming into the poll, and obviously a team or two at least dropping out of the poll. Now, if this is the first time watching this poll, this is my poll. I do this poll different than anyone else does it. I move teams up and down a lot throughout the season during this poll. A win does not necessarily guarantee your spot in the Uncle Lou poll. If you win but you look bad, you're likely to move down. If you dominate like you're supposed to, you're likely to stay the same or move up. So let's go through this list here. We're going to do it. We'll start at number 10, work our way down. All right, first off, here's some teams that's close to getting into the top 10, but for one reason or another, they're not. We're going to start with a couple of undefeated teams here, NC State and Colorado. Two undefeated Power 5 teams. Not in the top 10. I need to see them win a few more games. I know they're undefeated, and that's hard to do no matter who you're playing, but they need to win a few more games, in my opinion. Show me a little bit more before they come close to getting into this top 10. And then you've got a bunch of one-loss teams, right, who either are close to getting into the top 10, or maybe some of these one-loss teams will crack the top 10 this week. But when you start talking about one-loss teams, of course you're talking about teams like Michigan, Miami, Wisconsin. We could, the list really, I think I wrote some down. Oregon. Who else has one loss? Kentucky. Anyway, there's a lot of one-loss teams. Let me take a look at this poll here. There are a few one-loss teams in the poll this week. Anyway, let's just go ahead and get started with the top 10 here. All right, coming in at number 10, this is no surprise if you watched last week's video. Central Florida. I moved Central Florida into my top 10 last week at number 10, and I went ahead and told you they're going to stay at number 10 unless they lose a game. They're not moving up, and unless they lose, they're not falling out of that 10 spot. I'm trying to show Central Florida some respect, an amount of respect that I feel like they've earned and deserved without going overboard or sounding like a complete potato by saying they're a legitimate playoff team. And I also don't want to completely discredit what they're doing by not ranking them at all. I think 10 is a fair spot to put Central Florida. I've said this 100 times. I think Central Florida is a good enough program and a good enough team right now to challenge almost anybody in the country in a one-game scenario. The problem I have with teams like UCF is their week-to-week schedule, right? They did play a couple of Power 5 teams this year. Well, one got canceled. They beat the tar out of Pitt. But the problem with teams like UCF, and why I will never move them higher than 10 in my poll, is because I just feel like if you put them in a Power 5 conference and they had to play a Power 5 conference schedule, no chance they would be undefeated or ranked this high. I'll use the SEC as an example like I always do because obviously I'm a Georgia fan. But you put Central Florida in the SEC and make them play the 4 middle-of-the-road teams within the SEC, they're going 2-2. If they had to play Mississippi State at home, and then LSU on the road, and then Missouri at home, and then Ole Miss on the road, they're 2-2 there, okay? And forget about if they had to play like, Georgia on the road, home to Alabama, on the road at Auburn, home to Florida, something like that. They 0-4, 1-3 probably. So it's not the fact that I don't believe Central Florida is good enough or talented enough to beat any one team on any one given Saturday, as the saying goes. They don't have the talent or the depth, in my opinion, to run through a legitimate conference schedule. And for that reason, they're at number 10. They won't be moving any higher. So if that makes you mad, I'm sorry. I feel like that's a fair way to do it, though, based on how I feel about these group of 5 teams. All right, number 9 this week. This team was unranked. I think this team has been unranked since week 1. I think I had them in my first poll, and now they are back. The Washington Huskies. They beat UCLA last week 31-24. They go from unranked in last week's poll to now number 9 in this poll. I mentioned this on Sunday's video. It's looking more and more to me like the Pac-12 is going to get left out of the national championship again, left out of the playoffs altogether again. Washington does have a shot if they run the table and win the Pac-12 title game. That would put them at 12-1, with their only loss being a close loss opening week to Auburn. The problem for the Pac-12 and the Big 12, in my opinion, is another team that's up higher on this list, Notre Dame. Obviously, there are 5 Power 5 conferences, so at most, only 4 of those conferences can get a team in. In any year where Notre Dame is good enough to get in, the most Power 5 conferences that can get into the playoffs is 3. So you have to start asking yourself which of these conferences, is likely to get left out. And right now, I would say it's the Pac-12, but I've got Washington this week at number 9. They have a big game this coming week at Oregon. They have to win this game. They've got no room for error anyway because they lost week 1. But Oregon is probably the best remaining team on their schedule. A dominating win on the road at Oregon would go a long way, I think, when the playoff committee gets to evaluating teams here in another month or so. They need a big win here. All right, number 8, another team that's back into the poll after falling out for a little bit, Wisconsin. The Badgers return to the poll at number 8 this week after being unranked last week. They beat Nebraska 41-24. How impressive is that? I'm not sure. Everybody has beaten Nebraska. They're winless. They've yet to win a single game. Scott Frost got to be second guessing himself. I don't know. They play on the road at Michigan this week. This is a theme here in this top 10 too. You've got some teams playing some big games this week, right? Washington at Oregon, need a win bad. Now Wisconsin on the road this week at Michigan, needing a win bad. Game day is at that game this week. I don't want to hear anything else from anybody in the comment section or anywhere else about ESPN having SEC bias. This is not the best game of the week. But each of these teams have one loss. There's a game within the SEC this week featuring 2 top 10 or top 15 teams, depending on which poll you look at, that has a team with 1 loss and a number 2 team in the country with 0 losses. Obviously, I'm talking about Georgia on the road at LSU, and game day is going to Wisconsin and Michigan instead. They've been to a ton of Big Ten games already this year. Haven't been to an SEC game, I don't think, since opening weekend. But they might not have even been there anyway. The point is, I don't want to hear anything else about SEC bias. Game day will be at this Wisconsin and Michigan game. I have plenty to say about that on Wednesday in the top 25 preview video. But Wisconsin, after a win over Nebraska, still sitting with just the 1 loss. They're back in my top 10 poll this week at number 8. All right, we're on a roll with these 1-loss teams here, but at number 7, up 2 spots from last week, is Penn State. The Nittany Lions were off this past week. They moved up really by attrition. Obviously, you had 2 top 10 teams lose last week, LSU and Oklahoma, neither of which are in this poll, by the way. Now they both fell out after taking that loss, but Penn State moves from 9-7 after being off last week. They play Michigan State at home this week. This is another big game. Penn State's one of those teams with no more margin for error, right? The fear of Big Ten fans going into the season was that the Big Ten East was going to be so good and so much parity at the top with Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, that those teams would sort of round robin and knock each other off, and everybody would finish with 2 losses, forcing the Big Ten to miss the playoffs again. This is an opportunity for a step in that direction. If you're a Penn State fan and you lose this game, your playoff hopes are gone. Okay, say what you want about still having a chance to win the Big Ten based on Ohio State losing some games, or say whatever you want. You lose this game, it's basically over for you. I've yet to put Penn State on the season is over list. I know they lost to Ohio State. It was a close game, so I didn't put them on the season is over list. But if you lose this one, watch out. You'll be on there. All right, now number 6, another team moving up 2 spots this week in the poll, the Couch Burners. West Virginia comes in at number 6 this week after beating Kansas at 38-22. West Virginia's got a powerful offense, and I think they can score and compete with almost anybody in the country when it comes to what they can do on the offensive side of the ball. Defense has been, I think, a little bit better than advertised. I still wouldn't consider it to be anywhere near elite or anything like that, but by Big 12 standards, they've been playing okay and definitely better than what most people thought they would do. But something's going on the last 2 weeks at West Virginia. They looked uninterested and unmotivated. in games they should have dominated, and they did dominate portions of both of the games the last 2 weeks, but then they slept through portions of the last 2 games too. They can't have that attitude this coming week. They got to go on the road at Iowa State. Iowa State, of course, if you talk to a Big 12 fan, hardest place to play in the country. Of course, we know that's a load of crap. It's not true. Just because Oklahoma loses at Iowa State, or some other team loses at Iowa State, or whatever the case may be, doesn't mean it's automatically hard to play there. It just means somebody crapped the bed. But in any case, West Virginia can't afford to sleep here. Iowa State's not been a good team this year. West Virginia, obviously a much better team. But if Iowa State's going to pull off one of their signature upsets that they seem to get from time to time, this seems like this would be a good week for them to get it. Not sure it'll happen. I'll talk about that game, do a preview and prediction on Wednesday in the top 25 preview video that I do every Wednesday during the season. But they need to win this game, and they need to win it convincingly, and they need to play all 4 quarters. But the Mountaineers show up this week, moving up 2 spots from 8 to number 6. All right, now we get into the top 5. Here's another team that moved up for a couple of reasons. Clemson at number 5 this week. I had them 7 last week after a disastrous performance really against Syracuse, where Trevor Lawrence went down 2 days after Kelly Bryant announced he was leaving the program. It looked like things could be bad. Trevor Lawrence was back this week. I think he threw for 175 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns in a 63-3 domination of Wake Forest. This is the game Clemson fans have been waiting to see, and really college football fans. This is the Clemson you thought you were going to see all year, dominating teams within the ACC. Really hasn't happened up until this past week, but a 60-point win in conference here against Wake Forest. Finally, the Taters show up and put a whooping on somebody. They have a bye week next week, heading in then to the second half of their season, looking to finish out strong. Of course, they're everyone's favorite to win the ACC and make a playoff for the 4th straight year. But I have them this week moving up 2 spots to number 5, the Taters. All right, here we go with the top 4 now. I moved Georgia up 1 from 5 to number 4. Best game Georgia has played all year offensively, in my opinion. And you guys know I follow Georgia's my team, so I follow them closer than any other team. I don't necessarily look at the scores of these Georgia games to determine how an offense has been playing or not when it comes to Georgia. Georgia's been putting up 40-plus points in every game they've played. If you've been watching, you know that hasn't equated to me being happy with what I've seen offensively from Georgia. That was not the case this past week. Jake Fromm had by far his best game of the year, throwing for 275 and 3 touchdowns. Justin Fields came in, looked good at times. I think he was 3 of 6, but still they are playing him more and more, which is good, something I've been wanting to see. Still no sign of Demetrius Robertson. Not sure what's going on there. There are a lot of Georgia fans. I don't think this is the case, but there are a lot of Georgia fans who have been saying all year long that Georgia is dumbing things down and running very basic and vanilla schemes and play calling on both sides of the ball early in the season in an effort to hide things from better opponents, not give them film on certain things, whatever. I don't necessarily buy into that philosophy, but there are a lot of Georgia fans who feel that way. If that's the case, then the lid will come off this weekend when Georgia has to travel to Baton Rouge to play a road game at LSU. There's no reason to hide anything in that game. We will see whatever it is Georgia has to offer this coming weekend at LSU. I have a feeling it's going to be what we've been seeing already, which is a fairly conservative passing game with some shots mixed in here and there, and an effort to run the ball by committee with 4 average to slightly above average running backs, Holyfield, Swift, Harrion, and Cook. 41-13 over Vandy, homecoming win, getting revenge from 2 years ago when Vandy, of course, beat us at home. Huge, huge game this weekend on the road at LSU. Kirby Smart does not have a good track record against the SEC West in road games. He's 0-2 against the SEC West in road. I'll talk a ton about this game on Tuesday during the SEC preview video tomorrow, and then again on Friday when I do the Georgia LSU video. Of course, when I did my preseason predictions in the offseason, which I did 60 or 70 teams, in-depth previews, game-by-game predictions for 50 or 60 different teams, I picked UGA to go 11-1 during the regular season with a loss at LSU. I still think this is the most likely game on our schedule that we lose, if we lose one. Obviously, I'm a Georgia fan. When I make the Friday video, yes, I'll pick Georgia to win. That won't be any surprise to anybody. It's just hard to go undefeated. I do think Georgia's the better team. This is their toughest test of the year by far. And if you're going to lose, if Georgia's going to lose a game the rest of this season, this needs to be the one they lose. Georgia can't afford to lose to Kentucky or Florida. If they do, they probably will not win the East. Georgia can lose this game, and as long as they beat Kentucky and Florida, they'll still win the East. But if you reverse that, Georgia's in trouble and will likely lose the East, as Florida and Kentucky each are sitting on one loss. So, if Georgia loses this game, you'd have a three-way tie for first, but then Georgia still has an opportunity to beat those other two teams. We win this game, but lose one of those other two, likely not winning the East, and would be a disastrous season by any standard. But Georgia comes in this week at number 4. All right, up number 3 this week in the Uncle Lou poll, and Ohio State University. They were 3 last week. They stayed 3 this week after a victory over Indiana, 49-26. Ohio State, gave up more points than they wanted to in this game. This is the second or third time this has happened this year to Ohio State's defense. The Oregon State game comes to mind. They gave up, I think, 31 to them. Terrible team. Now, Indiana, not a terrible team, but still, even Ohio State fan will tell you that their defense is not really where they want it to be. Not a terrible defense by any stretch of the imagination, and talent-wise, one of the best in America, but they have had a few games where it hasn't looked as good as Ohio State fan would like it to. But still, you get a win here. What is this, a 23-point win, conference win against Indiana? Hard to knock that. No real reason to move you up or down. In my opinion, you're expected to win this game, and you did. This week you play Minnesota, another middle-of-the-road to / below-average Big Ten team. You should win that game with no problem. Let's see your defense play a little bit better in that one, though. If we can, suck nuts, that would be great. Urban Meyer, heart condition. Yeah, worrying about that defense. But anyway, I couldn't find a reason to move Ohio State up or down. The two teams ahead of them, no reason to move them down. I don't think Georgia beating Vandy is enough to jump Ohio State right now. Now, obviously, if Georgia beats LSU, maybe. We'll see. But anyway, Ohio State this week, number 3. All right, I kept the same team at number 2 I kept last week, and I've been doing this the second year in a row. I've been doing this weekly poll. Notre Dame at number 2. I probably caught more flack for Notre Dame at number 2 last week than I've ever caught in any of these poll videos for any team in any spot. People were, big mad is an understatement here that I had Notre Dame at number 2. I explained it a little last week. I'll do my best to explain it again here today. They have a great win against Michigan, okay? They have a good win against Stanford. Now, Stanford is not a terrible team. They're not elite. We've seen that. They lost this past weekend to Utah, but Notre Dame blew them out. It's not like they barely beat them. Now, Michigan was close, okay, but there's a couple of things of note here when you look at that Michigan game. Number 1, that's Michigan's only loss, okay? So until Michigan loses some games, it's hard to tell me that that's not a good win over Michigan. That was a good win. Number 2, Notre Dame is a much better team today than they were when they barely beat Michigan, okay? Of course, they made a quarterback change, getting rid of Wimbush, a guy that just couldn't get it together throwing the ball. He gave you everything you wanted with his legs and his running ability, but he was never able to develop as a passer. They bench him in favor of this Ian Book. Ian Book runs around a little bit, but he's more of a pro-style quarterback. Don't argue with me about that. Don't try to tell me he's a dual-threat quarterback. He's a pro-style quarterback who can run a little. If you don't understand the difference, then me explaining it to you probably won't do any good. He's a pro-style quarterback that can run around, and the main thing if you're a Notre Dame fan, or if you have to play Notre Dame, that you need to know is this: he can throw the ball, okay? He's light years ahead of where Wimbush was throwing the ball. Notre Dame is a dangerous team, and if you look at their schedule, it's hard to find a loss, okay? I don't really... Now, if you want to put Ohio State 2, if you want to put Georgia 2, hell, if you want to put Clemson... I mean, if you want to put Notre Dame 5 and have Ohio State, UGA, and Clemson all ahead of Notre Dame, that's fine. I can see where you can make an argument for that. But the thing is, Notre Dame is not likely to lose a game. I mean, they play teams like Pitt, Navy, Syracuse. They play Florida State. But, I mean, come on. They've been terrible this year. And then their only other halfway even decent competition other than Florida State the rest of the year is Southern Cal, a team that's sitting on a couple of losses already. Lost to Texas and I think lost to Stanford, who now we see it's not that good. I mean, Stanford beat Southern Cal, I think 17-3. Notre Dame beat Stanford, blew them out. So what are the chances there? Now, Notre Dame doesn't play at Southern Cal, but if you're a Notre Dame hater, you better buy you a Southern Cal hat because that's about your only shot here. And if Notre Dame goes undefeated, they're getting in the playoff, period. And this gets back to my argument about the Pac-12 and the Big 12 being in trouble. Oklahoma goes down. That hurts the chances of the Big 12 to get a playoff team, in my opinion. A one-loss Big 12 champion is not getting in the playoff ahead of Notre Dame. It's just not happening. It's just not. So you're looking at a situation in the Big 12 where teams could knock each other off, especially since the top two teams are going to have to play each other twice. The Big 12 does a round robin. Everybody in the Big 12 plays every other team during the regular season. There are no divisions in the Big 12. There is no East and West. Everybody plays everybody else. Then at the end of the regular season, they take the top two teams and they make them play again in the Big 12 title game. So you're probably going to see some combination of Texas, Oklahoma, and West Virginia have to play each other a second time in the Big 12 title game, all right? Texas already has a loss. West Virginia is undefeated. Oklahoma has the one loss. I find it hard to believe at this point anybody other than West Virginia has a shot of making the playoff out of the Big 12, and I don't know if I trust West Virginia to run the table. Could they beat Oklahoma? Yeah. Could they beat them twice in a row, which is what they would have to do because Oklahoma and West Virginia play in the last week of the regular season. If those end up being your top two teams, you're looking at having to beat Oklahoma twice in a row in back-to-back weeks to earn a spot to the playoffs. I'm not sure anybody could do that, much less West Virginia. Texas is in the mix too, but it's going to come down, in my opinion, to Texas, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. And like I said, two of those teams are going to have to play 3 times. If you're a one-loss Pac-12 team or a one-loss Big 12 team, you better be rooting for every single team that Notre Dame plays. You need Notre Dame to lose a game in the worst possible way. But anyway, they beat Virginia Tech 45-23. They got Pittsburgh this week. They'll win that game. Notre Dame, you can argue whether Notre Dame is one of the top 4 teams if you want. And that's a legitimate argument that people can have. But you have to be living in reality here. If you think this playoff committee is going to leave out an undefeated Notre Dame, you're out of your mind, especially if that undefeated Notre Dame has wins over Michigan, Stanford, Southern Cal, Florida State. They're going to have some pretty good wins. Cry about it. All right, and the Gumps come in at number 1 again. They dispatched of Arkansas 65-3.
Better put a 1 on the end of that.
65-31? You gave up 31 points to Arkansas?
Bama!
That's the most points Arkansas has scored all year. They're the worst team in the Power 5.
Bama!
They lost to North Texas and Colorado State.
Bama!
Oh my God. You gave up 31 points to Arkansas?
Bama!
I should should I put Notre Dame number 1? 31?
Bama!
That's embarrassing. And this week you play Missouri. They don't have a defense either. Not really anyway. They're a little bit better than Arkansas. Not much. Alabama will beat them without a problem. But yeah, Alabama stays number 1. Say what you want. Yes, they gave up 31 points, but they scored 65 in basically 2.5 quarters of football. Alabama has been scoring at will this year, particularly with its first string offense. They've yet to run into any type of defense that can even slow them down. We'll see if that changes when they play a couple of teams here coming up in the next couple of months. LSU, Auburn. We'll see if those teams can slow them down at all. That's yet to be determined. But anyway, Bama stays number 1 in the poll this week after giving up 31 points to something called Arkansas.
Bama!
All right, that's it. The Uncle Lou Top 10 for this week. What is this, the 7th edition of this poll this year? I think it is. Anyway, be sure and tell me where I'm wrong. Be sure and tell me I've probably never watched a football game before. Be sure and tell me I'm not a real fan. All that kind of stuff. Be sure and tell me all that. I appreciate you guys watching. Check out the live shows. We do a live call-in show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern right here on this channel, and every Tuesday night and Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. Live call-in show. I take calls from college football fans from all over. We have a great time on there. I love doing those shows. We really do have a good time on there. And then, of course, Saturday morning I have another live show too at 9 a.m. I don't generally take phone calls during that show. I sit out here and watch College Game Day and talk with you guys in the comment section about the day's games. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe if you're not, and I'll see you guys soon. Have a great morning.